Ah, welcome, O Kirinasai. Warm yourself by the fire. Have a seat or snuggle up in your favorite spot. Usuwari kudasai. And let me tell you some Japanese folktale or ghost stories. Hajimemashou. Tomodatta, a young samurai, owed allegiance to the Lord of Noto. He was a soldier, a courtier, and a poet. He had a sweet voice and a beautiful face, a noble form, and a very winning address. He was a graceful dancer and excelled in every manly sport. He was wealthy, generous, and kind. He was beloved by rich and by poor. Now his daimyo, the Lord of Noto, wanted a man to undertake a mission of trust. He chose Tomodatta and called him to his presence. Upon being reassured of Tomodatta's loyalty, the daimyo ordered him on a quest. "Carry my message," said the daimyo. "Ride and do not spare your beast. Ride straight and fear not the mountains, nor the enemy's country. Stray not from storm nor any other things. Lose your life, but betray not your trust. Above all, do not look any maid in the eyes. Ride and bring me the result of your quest, quickly." So, Tomodatta took his horse and away he rode upon his quest. Obedient to his lord's commands, he spared not his good beast. He rode straight and was not afraid of the steep mountain passes, nor of the enemy's territory. He had been 3 days upon the road when an autumn storm burst, for it was in the 9th month. Down poured the rain, in torrents. Tomodatta bowed his head and rode on. The wind howled in the pine tree branches. It blew a typhoon. The good horse trembled and could scarcely keep its feet. But Tomodatta spoke to it, comforted, and urged his horse onward. His own cloak he drew close about him, and he held it so that it might not blow away, and in this way he rode on. The fierce storm swept away many a familiar landmark of the road, and buffeted the samurai so that he became weary, fatigued, almost fainting. High noon was as dark as twilight. Twilight was as dark as night, and when night fell, it was as black as the night of Yomi, where lost souls wander and cry. By this time, Tomodatta had lost his way in a wild, lonely place, where, as it seemed to him, no human soul inhabited. His horse could carry him no longer, and he wandered on foot through bogs and marshes, through rocky and thorny tracts, until he fell into deep despair. "Alas," he cried, "must I die in this wilderness, and the quest of the Lord of Noto be unfulfilled?" At this moment, the great winds blew away the clouds of the sky, so that the moon shone very brightly, and by the sudden light, Tomodatta saw a little hill to the right of him. Upon the hill was a small thatched cottage, and before the cottage grew 3 green weeping willow trees. Tomodatta climbed the hill in no time. Light shone from the cracks in the cottage door, and smoke curled out of a hole in the roof. The 3 willow trees swayed and flung out their green streamers in the wind. Tomodatta threw his horse's reins over a branch of one of them, and called for the admittance to the lodge for shelter. At once the cottage door was opened by an old woman, very poorly but cleanly clad. "Who rides abroad upon such a night, and what does he want here?" she asked. Tomodatta introduced himself, said that he was lost and a stranded traveler and a samurai on a mission in the service of the Lord of Noto. He begged her to show hospitality, and that he needed food and shelter for himself and for his horse. As the young man stood speaking, the water streamed from his garments. He reeled a little and put out a hand to hold on by the side of the post of the door. The old woman, full of pity, bade the young samurai to come in. She offered him the best of and of what food she had. As to your horse, I see you have delivered him to my daughter. He's in good hands, she said. Well, at this, Tomodatta turned around sharply, and just behind him in the dim light stood a very young girl with the horse's reins thrown over her arm. Her garments were blown about her, and her long, loose hair streamed out upon the wind. The samurai wondered how she had come to be there, and the old woman drew him into the cottage and shut the door. Before the fire sat the man of the house, and the two old people did the very best they could for Tomodatta. They gave him dry garments, hot rice wine, comforted him, and quickly prepared a good supper for him. Presently, the daughter of the house came in and retired behind a screen to comb her hair and to dress in clean garments. Then she came forth to wait upon the young samurai. She wore a blue robe of homespun cotton. Her feet were bare. Her hair was not tied nor confined in any way, but lay alongside her smooth cheeks and hung straight, long and black, to her very knees. She was slender and graceful. Tomodatta judged her to be of age and knew well that she was the fairest maiden he had ever seen. At length, she knelt at his side to pour wine into his cup. She held the wine bottle in two hands and bent her head. Tomodatta turned to look at her, and when she had made an end of pouring the wine and had set down the bottle, their glances met, and Tomodatta looked at her full in the eyes, for he forgot altogether the warnings of his daimyo, the Lord of Noto. "Maiden, what is your name?" he asked. "They call me Green Willow," she answered. At this, the young samurai declared it was the dearest name on earth, and again he looked deep into her eyes. And because he looked so long, her face grew rosy red from chin to forehead, and though she smiled, her eyes were filled with tears. Tomodatta's trance was then broken, and he remembered the daimyo's quest and warning. But the maiden, the Green Willow, continued to gaze deep into his eyes with a power that was much like a siren's song. That night he lay before the fire, but with wide eyes, for no sleep came to him, though he was drained and weary. He was entranced, sick with longing for the love of Green Willow. Yet by the rules of his service, he was bound in honor to think of no such thing. Moreover, he had the quest of the Lord of Noto that lay heavy on his heart, and he longed to keep truth and loyalty. At the first peep of day, he rose up. He looked upon the kind old man who had been his host and left a purse of gold at the side as he slept. The maiden and her mother lay behind the screen. Tomodatta saddled and bridled his horse, and mounting, rode slowly away through the mist of the early morning. The storm was quite over, and it was as still and as lovely as paradise. The green grass and the leaves shone brightly with the storm's remains. The sky was clear, and the path very bright with autumn flowers, but Tomodatta was sad. When the morning sunlight streamed across his saddle, Tomodatta began muttering, "Green Willow, Green Willow." At high noon, and when the twilight came, he was still muttering, "Green Willow, Green Willow." That night, the young samurai lay in a deserted shrine, and the place was so holy, so peaceful, that in spite of all that he had endured, and the pain in his heart, he slept from midnight until dawn. At daybreak he rose, having it in his mind to wash himself in a cold stream that flowed nearby, so as to begin the day clean, refreshed upon his journey. But he was stopped upon the shrine's threshold, for there lay the Green Willow, prone upon the ground. A slender thing, she lay face downwards, with her black hair flung about her. She lifted a hand and held Tomodatta by the sleeve. She called his name, and then fell to the ground, sobbing piteously. He took her in his arms without a word, and soon set her on his horse before him, and together they rode throughout the day. It was little that they saw of the road as they traveled, for all the while they looked into each other's eyes. The heat and the cold were nothing to them. They felt not the sun, nor the rain. Of truth or falsehood they thought nothing at all, nor of filial piety, nor of the Lord of Noto's quest, nor of honor, nor plighted word. They knew but one thing, their need for each other and never parting in their love. At last, they came to an unknown city, where they stayed. Tomodatta carried gold and jewels in his saddle, so they found a house built of white wood and spread with sweet white mats. In every dim room there could be heard the sound of the garden waterfall, while the swallow flitted back and forth across the paper lattice. Here they dwelt, knowing but the one thing. And 3 years of happy days, and for Tomodatta and the Green Willow, the years were like garlands of sweet flowers. In the autumn of that year, it chanced that the two of them went forth into the garden at dusk, for they had a wish to see the round moon rise, and as they watched, the Green Willow began to shake and to quiver. "My dear," said Tomodatta, "you shake and quiver, and it is no wonder the night wind is chill. Come inside." And he put his arm around her. At this, she gave a long and pitiful cry, very loud and full of agony, and when she had uttered the cry, she collapsed into the arms of Tomodatta and dropped her head upon her lover's chest. "Tomodatta," she whispered, "say a prayer for me. I die." Tomodatta begged and pleaded with her, tried to convince her that she was only faint or feverish. He carried her to the side of the stream, where the iris grew like swords, and the lotus leaves like shields, and caressed her forehead with water. Well, he begged her to keep her eyes open and to stay with him, and that she would be all right. "The tree," she moaned. "Tree, they have cut down my tree. Remember the Green Willow." And with that, she slipped, as it seemed, from his arms to his feet, and he, casting himself upon the ground, found only silken garments, brightly colored, warm, and sweet, and scarlet-colored straw sandals. In later years, when Tomodatta had given up the way of the samurai and was a holy man, he traveled from shrine to shrine painfully upon his feet, for which he gained much notoriety and respect. Once, at nightfall, he found himself upon a lonely moor. On his right-hand side he beheld a little hill, and on it sat the sad ruins of a poor thatched cottage. The door swung to and fro with broken latch and creaking hinge. Before it stood 3 old stumps of willow trees that had long since been cut down. Tomodatta stood for a long time, still and silent. Then he began to gently sing to himself of his lost love and memories of what might have been. Tomodatta then became angry at himself for his selfishness, his self-pity. He begged his gods for forgiveness. In want of keeping Green Willow's spirit happy, at peace, and coming back to him, he cried that he should have recited the Holy Sutra for the dead. Tomodatta grieved over his selfishness, his lost love, and what might have been. It is said that long, long ago, there lived in Edo a gentleman of good lineage and very honest conversation. His wife was a gentle and loving lady. To his secret grief, she bore him no sons, but a daughter she did give him, whom they called Oyoni. Each of them loved this child more than life and guarded her as the apple of their eye. And the child grew up red and white and long-eyed, straight and slender as the green bamboo. When Oyoni was 12 years old, her mother became very ill in the fall of that year, sick, weak, and frail. When the red had faded from the leaves of the maple, she was dead, and then shrouded and laid in the earth. The husband was wild in his grief. He cried aloud, he beat his breast, he lay upon the ground and refused comfort. And for days, he neither broke his fast nor slept. The child, Oyoni, was quite still and silent. Time passed by, but the man had to continue on with life. The snows of winter fell and covered his wife's grave. The beaten pathway from his house to the dwelling of the dead was snow-covered, undisturbed, save for the faint prints of a child's sandaled feet. In the springtime, he girded up his robe and went forth to see the cherry blossoms, and wrote a poem upon gilded paper, which he hung to a cherry tree branch to flutter in the breeze. The poem was in praise of the spring and of Saki. Later, he planted the orange lily of forgetfulness and thought of his wife no more. But the child, the child remembered. Before the year was out, he brought a new bride home, a woman with a fair face, yet a black heart. But the man, poor blind fool, was happy and commended his child to her care and believed that all was well. Now, because her father loved Oyoni, her stepmother hated her with a jealous and deadly hatred. And every day she dealt cruelty to the child, whose gentle ways and patience only angered her the more. Because of her father's presence, she did not dare to do Oyoni any great harm. Therefore, she waited, biding her time. The poor child passed her days and her nights in torment and in horrible fear. But of these things, she said not a word to her father. After some time, It chanced that the man was called away by his business to a distant city. Kyoto was the name of the city, and from Edo it took many days' journey on foot or on horseback. However, the man's work meant that he must go and stay there 3 months or more. Therefore he made ready and equipped himself and his servants that were to go with him, with all the things needful. And so came the last night before his departure, which was to be very early in the morning. He called Oyoni to him, so Oyoni went and knelt before him. "What gift shall I bring you from Kyoto?" he asked. But she hung her head and did not answer. He begged her for an answer, because he felt guilty at having to leave her for so long. Then she burst into bitter weeping, and he took her upon his knee to soothe her. But she hid her face with her sleeves and cried as if her heart would break. She begged and pleaded for her father not to go away. But he could not stay. He had to leave. He assured Oyoni that time would go by very quickly, like the blink of an eye, and that he would be home again with lovely gifts. She begged to go with him, not to be left behind. But he said there was no room for her, and no horse for her to ride, as they were all laden with goods. He told Oyoni to take her heart and to be happy, as her kind stepmother would be with her. Oyoni shuddered in his arms, and she told her father that if he left, he would never see her again. At this, the father felt a sudden chill about his heart that gave him pause, but he would not listen to it. Why should he, a strong grown man, be swayed by a child's fear or complaining? He gently put Oyoni down, and then she slipped away from him, as silently as a shadow. But in the morning she came to him before sunrise with a little flute in her hand, fashioned of bamboo and smoothly polished. "I made it myself," she said, "from a bamboo in the grove that is behind our garden. I made it for you. As you cannot take me with you, take the little flute, honorable father. Play on it sometimes, if you will, and think of me." Then she wrapped the flute in a handkerchief of white silk lined with scarlet, and wound a scarlet cord about it, and gave it to her father, who put it in his sleeve. And after this, he departed and went on his way, taking the road to Kyoto. And as he went, he looked back 3 times and beheld his child, standing at the gate, looking after him. And then the road turned and, well, he saw her no more. The father made his way to Kyoto, with the business during the day, which went very well, and his pleasures in the evening, and his sound sleep at night. The time passed merrily, and small thought he gave to Edo, to his home, or to his child. 2 months passed, and then 3, and he made no plans for a return home. One evening he was making ready to go to a great supper at his friend's, and as he searched in his chest for a certain silken hakama which he intended to wear as an honor to the feast, he came upon the little flute, which had lain hidden all this time in the sleeve of his traveling dress. He drew it forth from its red and white handkerchief, and as he did so, felt strangely cold with an icy chill that crept around his heart. He hung over the live charcoal of the hibachi as one in a dream. He put the flute to his lips when there suddenly came from it a long-drawn wail. He dropped it hastily upon the mats and clapped his hands for his servant and told him he would not go forth that night. He was not feeling well, and he would be left alone. After a long time, he reached out his hand for the flute, and again, that long, melancholy cry. He shook from head to foot, but he blew into the flute. "Come back to Edo. Come back, Father. Father!" The quavering, childish voice rose to a shriek, and then broke. A horrible foreboding now took possession of the man, and he was beside himself. He flung himself from his house and from the city, and journeyed by day and by night, denying himself sleep and food. So pale was he and wild that people deemed him to be a madman and fled from him, or pitied him as afflicted by disease. At last he came to his journey's end, travel-stained from head to heel, with bleeding feet and half dead of weariness. His wife met him at the gate. He frantically asked where the child was. "The child," she answered. "Hey, the child, my child, where is she?" he cried in agony. The woman laughed. "Oh, my lord, how should I know? She's with her books, or she's in the garden, or she is asleep, or perhaps she has gone forth with her playmates, or—" He screamed, "Enough!" and demanded to know where his child was. Then she became afraid. "In the bamboo grove," she said, looking at him with wide eyes. There the man ran and sought Oyoni among the green stems of the bamboos. But he did not find her. He called Oyoni again and again, but he had no answer. Only the wind sighed in the dry bamboo leaves. Then he felt in his sleeve and brought forth the little flute, and very tenderly put it to his lips. There was a faint sighing sound, and then a voice spoke, thin and pitiful. "Father, dear father, my wicked stepmother killed me. 3 months since she has killed me. She buried me in the clearing of the bamboo grove. You may find my bones. And as for me, you will see me no more." With his own two-handed sword, the man did justice and slew his wicked wife, avenging the death of his innocent child. Then he dressed himself in coarse white raiment, with a great rice straw hat that shadowed his face. He took a staff and a straw raincoat and bound sandals on his feet, and thus he set forth upon a pilgrimage to the holy places of Japan. And for the rest of his life, Oyoni's father carried the little flute with him, in a fold of his garments, next to his heart. It is said that in Edo there dwelt a samurai called Hagiwara. He was a samurai of the Hatamoto, a guardian of the banner or the emperor's guard, which is of all the ranks of samurai the most honorable. He possessed a noble figure and a very handsome face, and was loved and admired by many a lady in Edo, both openly and in secret. As for himself, being yet very young, his thoughts turned to pleasure rather than to love, and morning, noon, and night he was at the height of enjoyment with the youth of the city. He was the prince and leader of joyous revels within doors and without, and would often parade the streets with bands of his most favored companions. One bright and wintry day, during the festival of the New Year, he found himself with a company of laughing youths and maidens, playing hanetsuki and enjoying themselves. He had wandered far away from his own quarter of the city, and was now in a suburb quite on the other side of Edo. where the streets were empty more or less, and the quiet houses stood in gardens. Hagiwara wielded his heavy paddle with great skill and grace, catching the gilded shuttlecock and tossing it lightly into the air, but at length, with a careless or ill-judged hit, he sent it flying over the hedges of the players and over the bamboo fence of a garden nearby. Immediately he started after it. Then his friend companions cried, "Stay, Hagiwara! Dame, dame! Here, we have more than a dozen shuttlecocks." "No, this one was dove-colored and gilded," he said. His friends pleaded with him not to go into the property, but he paid them no heed, for he had become full of a very strange desire for that particular shuttlecock he had lost. He scaled the bamboo fence and dropped into the garden, which was upon the farther side. Now he had marked the very spot where the shuttlecock should have fallen, but it was not there. So he searched along the foot of the bamboo fence. But no, he could not find it. Up and down he went, beating the bushes with his paddle, his eyes on the ground, drawing very heavy breath as if he had lost his dearest treasure. His friends called to him, but he did not return, and they grew tired and went to their own homes. The light of day began to fail, and Hagiwara, the samurai, looked up and saw a girl standing a few yards away from him. She beckoned him with her right hand, and in her left she held a gilded shuttlecock with dove-colored feathers. The samurai shouted joyfully and ran forward. Then the girl drew away from him, still beckoning him with her right hand. The shuttlecock lured him, and he followed. So they went, the two of them, until they came to the house that was in the garden, and 3 stone steps up that led to it. Beside the lowest step there grew a plum tree in blossom, and upon the highest step there stood a fair and very young lady. She was most splendidly attired in robes of high festival. Her kimono was of water blue silk with sleeves of the ceremony so long that they touched the ground. Her underdress was scarlet, and her great gild of brocade was stiff and heavy with gold. In her hair were pins of gold, and tortoiseshell, and coral. When Hagiwara saw the lady, he knelt down and pledged her his love and fealty, till his forehead touched the ground. Then the lady spoke, smiling with pleasure like a child. "Come into my house, Hagiwara-sama, samurai of the Hatamoto. I am Otsuyu, the lady of the morning dew. My dear handmaiden, Oyoni, has brought you to me. Come in, Hagiwara-sama, samurai of the Hatamoto, for indeed I am glad to see you, and happy is this hour." So the samurai went in, and they brought him to a room of 10 mats, where they entertained him, for the lady of the morning dew danced before him in the ancient manner, while Oyoni, the handmaiden, beat upon a small scarlet tasseled drum. And afterwards they set food before him, the red rice of the festival and sweet warm wine, and he ate and drank of the food they gave him. It was dark night when Hagiwara took his leave. Oyoni, the handmaiden, and the lady of the dew bade Hagiwara to return. The samurai laughed. "And if I do not come back?" he asked mockingly. The lady of the morning dew stiffened, and her happy, childlike face grew gray, and she laid her hand upon Hagiwara's shoulder. "Then," she said, "it will be death, my lord. Death it will be for you and for me. There is no other way." Oyoni shuddered and hid her eyes with her sleeve. the samurai went out into the night, being very much afraid. Long had he sought for his home, yet could not find it, wandering in the black darkness from one end of the sleeping city to the other. When at last he reached his familiar door, the late dawn was near, and wearily he threw himself upon his bed. Then he laughed, thinking of only the shuttlecock he had left behind. The next day, Hagiwara sat alone in his house from morning till evening. He just stared at his hands before him, and he thought, but did nothing more. Finally, he convinced himself that it was nothing more than a joke, that a couple of geisha had thought to play a trick on him. So he dressed himself in his best and went out to join his friends. 5 or 6 days he was jousting and junketing, having the happiest of times. His wit was ready and quick, his spirits were wild. When he had tired of playing games, he took to walking the streets of Edo alone. From end to end of the great city he went. He wandered by day and he wandered by night. By streets and alley he went, by hill and moat and castle wall. But he found not what he sought. He could not come upon the gardens where his shuttlecock was lost. Yet upon the Lady of the Morning Dew, his spirit had no rest. He fell sick and took to his bed, where he neither ate nor slept, but grew thin and weak. This was in about the 3rd month. In the 6th month, the time of the hot and rainy season, he rose up, and in spite of all, his faithful servant could say or do nothing to dissuade him. He wrapped a loose summer robe about him and at once set forth. His servant continued to plead, thinking he was delirious with fever, but Hagiwara faltered not at all. He looked neither to the right nor to the left. Straight forward he went, for he said to himself, "All roads lead past my love's house." Soon he came to a quiet suburb and to a certain house whose garden had a split bamboo fence. Hagiwara laughed softly and scaled the fence. He found the garden wild and overgrown. Moss covered the 3 stone steps. The plum tree that grew there sadly fluttered its green leaves. The house was still. Its shutters were all closed. It was sad, deserted. The samurai grew cold as he stood and wondered, as a soaking rain fell. There came an old man into the garden. He said to Hagiwara, "Sir, why are you here?" "The white flower has fallen from the plum tree," said the samurai. "Where is the Lady of the Morning Dew?" "Oh, she is dead," answered the old man. "Dead these last 5 or 6 months of a strange and sudden sickness. She lies in the graveyard on the hill, and Oyoni, her handmaiden, lies by her side. She could not suffer her mistress to wander alone through the long night of Yomi. For their sweet spirit's sake, I would still tend this garden. But I am old, and it is little that I can do. Oh, sir, they are dead indeed. The grass grows on their graves." Hagiwara went to his own home. He took a slip of pure white wood and wrote upon it, in large fair characters, the dear name of his lady. This he set up, and burned before it incense and sweet odors, and made every offering there was, and did due observance, and all for the welfare of her departed spirit. Then drew near the festival of Obon, the time of returning souls. The good folk of Edo took lanterns and visited their graves. bringing food and flowers. They cared for their beloved dead. On the 13th day of the 7th month, Hagiwara, the samurai, walked in his garden by night for the sake of the coolness. A higurashi, a Japanese evening cicada, hidden in the heart of a pomegranate flower, sang shrill and mournfully on occasion. Now and again a carp leapt into the air in the little pond. For the rest, it was still, and never a leaf stirred. About the hour of the ox, otherwise known as the witching hour to those who dwell in the west, Hagiwara heard the sound of footsteps in the lane that lay beyond his garden hedge. Nearer and nearer they came. He knew by the hollow echoing noise it was the sandals and footsteps of women. Looking over his rose hedge, he saw two slender women come out of the dimness, hand in hand. One of them carried a lantern with a bunch of peony flowers tied to the handle. It was such a lantern as used in the time of the Obon, in the service of the dead. It swung as the two women walked, casting an uncertain light. As they came abreast of the samurai upon the other side of the hedge, they turned their faces to him. He knew them at once, and gave one great cry. The girl with the peony lantern held it up so that the light fell upon him. Oyoni cried out that she and the Lady of the Morning Dew had been searching for the young samurai for months. Hagiwara was overjoyed and bade the two cross the garden gate and join him, and so they did. But the Lady of the Morning Dew held up her sleeve to hide her face. The samurai asked them how it was that he had lost them for so long. Oyoni said that they had moved to a little house, a very little house, in the quarter of the city which is called the Green Hill. They were suffered to take nothing with them there, and had become very poor. With grief and want, her mistress, the Lady of the Morning Dew, had become sick and pale. Then Hagiwara took his lady's sleeve to draw it gently from her face. She sobbed and wailed that she was no longer beautiful, and that he would not love her any longer. But when he looked upon her, his love flamed up within him like a consuming fire, and it shook him from head to foot. But he said not a word. She faltered with weakness and love's pain, and asked Hagiwara if she should go or stay. "Stay," he said. A little before daybreak, the samurai fell into a deep sleep, and awoke to find himself alone in the clear light of the morning. He lost not an instant, but rose and immediately made his way through Edo to the quarter of the city which is called the Green Hill. Here he inquired for the house of the Lady of the Morning Dew, but no one could direct him. High and low he searched, but to no satisfaction. It seemed to him that for the second time he had lost his dear lady, his love, and turned homeward in bitter despair. His way led him through the grounds of a certain temple, and as he went, he saw two graves that were side by side. One was little and obscure, but the other was marked by a fair monument, like the tomb of some great one. Before the monument, there hung a lantern with a bunch of peony flowers tied to its handle. It was such a lantern as is used at the time of Obon, in the service of the dead. Long, long did the samurai stand, as one in a dream. Then he smiled a little and thought of what Oyoni had told him and said to the graves, "A little house, a dark house, yet you will make room for me. Oh, my beloved, pale one of my desires." We have loved for the space of 10 existences. Leave me not now, my dear." And then he went home. His faithful servant met him and questioned what was wrong with his master. What ailed him? Hagiwara told him it was nothing, and that he had never been more happy. But the servant departed weeping, and saying that the mark of death was on his face, and then wondered what would happen to him when his master dies. Every night, for 7 nights, the maidens with the Peony Lantern came to Hagiwara's dwelling. Fair weather or foul was the same to them. They came at the hour of the ox. There was mystic wooing during this time, the strong bond of illusion, where the living and the dead are bound together. On the 7th night, the servant of the samurai, wakeful with fear and sorrow, made bold to peer into his lord's room through a crack in the wooden shutters. His hair stood on end, and his blood ran cold to see Hagiwara in the arms of a fearful thing, and Hagiwara smiling up at the horror that was its face, stroking its dank green robe with languid fingers. With the daylight, the servant made his way to a holy man of his acquaintance. When he had told his tale, he asked if there were any hope for Hagiwara-sama. "Alas," said the holy man, "who can withstand the power of karma? Nevertheless, there is a little hope." So he told the servant what he must do. Before nightfall, the servant had set a sacred text above every door and window of his master's house, and he had rolled into the silk of his master's girdle a golden emblem of the Tathagata. When these things were done, Hagiwara, being drawn 2 ways, stretched between the worlds of life and death, became himself as weak as water, and a servant took him in his arms, laid him upon his bed, covered him lightly, and saw him fall into a deep, deep sleep. At the hour of the ox, there was heard the sound of footsteps in the lane. Nearer and nearer they came. They grew slow, and then stopped. The Lady of the Morning Dew asked Oyoni what was wrong with the house. Why could she not see Hagiwara? She then bade Oyoni to find a way to take her to Hagiwara. But Oyoni informed the Lady of the Morning Dew that she could find no entrance. Holy writing was over every window and door, and they may not enter this place. There was the sound of bitter weeping and a long wail, and the footsteps retreated and their echo died away. The next night, it was quite the same. Hagiwara slept in his weakness. His servant watched. The wraiths came and departed in sobbing despair. The 3rd day, when Hagiwara went to the bathhouse, a thief stole the emblem, the golden emblem of the Tathagata, from his girdle. Hagiwara, that night, lay awake, but it was his servant that slept, worn out with watching over his master. Presently a great rain fell, and Hagiwara heard the sound of it upon the roof. The heavens were opened, and for hours the rain fell and the wind blew. The storm tore the holy text from over the window in Hagiwara's chamber. And at the hour of the ox, there was again heard the sound of footsteps in the lane. Nearer and nearer they came. They grew slow and stopped, as they had before. Hagiwara called to the wraiths with a great voice and bade them come in, as he could not move from his couch to open the door. The Lady of the Morning Dew told Hagiwara that she could not come in, though the separation caused her pain like that of 1,000 sharp swords. So the lady cried and moaned like the lost soul that she was. But Oyoni took her hand. "See the window. The holy writing has fallen and made a way for us," she said. Hand in hand the two rose, slowly from the earth. Like vapor, they passed through the unguarded window. The samurai called for them again, and he was answered by the Lady of the Morning Dew. "I come to thee." In the gray morning, Hagiwara's servant found his master, cold and dead. At his feet stood the Peony Lantern, burning with a strange yellow flame. The servant shivered, took up the lantern, and blew out the light. "I cannot bear it," he said, and mourned his master's loss to the spirit world and his own unknown future. It was a deity from high heaven that planted the pine tree. The crane and the tortoise spoke of this. It is said that, long ago, the heavenly deity descended. Lightly he glided and came by way of the floating bridge, bearing the tree in his right hand, and lightly his feet touched the earth. It is said that he saw this as a good land and was satisfied with planting it in that place. And he planted the pine tree within the sounds of the sea at Takasaga, in the province of Harima. Then he went up again to high heaven by way of the floating bridge. But the pine tree flourished. There was not a greater tree in all the land of the reed plains. Its trunk was rosy red, and beneath it spread a brown carpet of fallen needles. In the sweet nights of summer, the children of the woods came hand in hand to the pine tree by moonlight, slipping their slim, dark feet upon the moss and tossing back their long green hair. The children of the water came by moonlight, their sleeves all drenching wet, and the bright drops falling from their fingertips. The children of the air rested in the pine tree's branches and made murmuring music all the livelong night. The children of the sea foam crept up the yellow sand, and from the confines of Yomi came the mysteries, the sounds, and the scents of the dark. With faces veiled and thin gray forms they came, and they hung upon the air about the place where the pine tree was, so that the place was holy and haunted. Lovers wandering upon the beach at Takasaga would hear the great company of spirits singing together. Poor souls, lying sick in bed, would listen, and fishermen far out to sea would pause in their labor and remark of how the sounds carried over the water. As for the coming of the maiden, it is said that she was born of poor parents in Takasaga. The maiden was brown, tall, and slender, but in the face and form, most lovely. She rose at dawn to help her mother. She found sticks for the fire. She drew water at the well. Well, she could spin and weave with the best, and for long, long hours, she sat and plied her wheel or her shuttle in the shade of the great pine tree, while her ears heard the sound of the wind in its branches. Well, sometimes her eyes looked out over the paths of the sea, as one who waits and watches. She was calm, not restless, more grave than happy, though she often smiled. Her voice was the voice of a heavenly being. Now, concerning the boy from the far province, of him the crane knows something, for the crane is a great traveler. She was flying over the streams and the valleys of the far province one day, so she says, when she saw the youth at work in the green rice fields. The crane lingered, circling slowly in the bright air. The youth stood up. He looked around the valley and streams. He looked into the sky. It was as if he could hear a distant calling and feel the pull of some unknown force. With this, he left the rice field and bade farewell to his family and friends. And altogether they came down to the seashore, weeping and clinging to each other. The youth took a boat and went away to sea, and the rest of them stood upon the beach as he faded into the distance. On sped the boat for many days over the unknown paths of the sea, and the white crane flew behind the boat, and when the wind failed, she pushed the boat forward with the wind of her strong wings. At last, one evening, about the hour of sunset, the youth heard the sound of sweet singing. The sound came to him from the land, and it traveled over the paths of the sea. Well, he stood up in the boat, and the crane beat her strong white wings and guided his boat to the shore till its keel touched the yellow sand of the beach of Takasaga. When the youth had come ashore, he pushed the boat out again, and with the waves, watched it drift away. Then he turned his face inland. The sound of the music was still in his ears. The voice was like the voice of a heavenly being. Strange and mystical were the words of the song. The youth went inland and came to the great pine tree and to the maid that sat beneath, weaving diligently and singing. The crane came flying with her strong white wings and perched upon the tree's topmost branches. The tortoise lay below on the brown carpet of needles. He watched and saw much with his eyes, but he said nothing, being very silent by nature. The youth stood before the maiden, waiting, and the maiden asked from where and why the boy had come. But he said that she must know the answer to these questions, as it was her that had called to his heart and bade him bring to her a gift. "Did you bring me the gift?" she asked. "Indeed, I bring you the complete gift, jewels of jade upon a silken string." She rose and took him by the hand, and they went to her father's house. And so, there, they drank the 3x3, or Sansan Kudo ceremony, and were made man and wife, and lived in sweet tranquility for many, many years. All the time, the crane dwelt in the pine tree's topmost branches, and the tortoise on the brown carpet of needles below. At last, the youth and the maiden that once were became white-haired, old, and withered by the swift, relentless passage of years. "Fair love," said the old man, "how weary I grow. It is sad to be old." "Say not so, dear. Oh, dear delight of my heart," said the old woman. "Say not so. The best of all is to come." "No, my dear," said the old man. "I have a desire to see the great pine tree before I die, and to listen once more to the song of the wind in its branches." She rose and took him by the hand. Old, faint, and worn with feeble tottering feet, hand in hand they came. "How faint I grow," said the old man. "Oh, I am afraid. How dark it is becoming. Hold my hand. I have it fast in mine. There, lie down, my dear love. Be still, and listen to the wind in the trees," she said to him. He lay on the soft brown bed beneath the pine tree boughs, and the wind sang. She, who was his love and his wife, bent over him and sheltered him. And then he suffered the great change and slipped into that world beyond. He then opened his eyes and looked at her. She was tall, straight and slender, in face and form most lovely. And each of them was young, as though time had never touched them. He put out his hand and touched her in amazement. Once more she bade him go with her, and slowly they rose and left the ground. To the sound of the wind's music they swayed. They floated in the air, higher and higher they rose. The branches of the pine tree received them, and then they were seen no more. It is said that in the sweet nights of summer, the children of the woods come, hand in hand to the pine tree by moonlight, slipping their slim dark feet upon the moss, and tossing back their long green hair. The children of the water come by moonlight, their sleeves drenching wet, and the bright drops fall from their fingertips. The children of the air rest in the pine tree's branches and make murmuring music all the livelong night. The children of the sea foam creep up the yellow sands, and from the confines of Yomi come the mysteries, the sounds, and the scents of the dark. With faces veiled in thin gray forms they come, and they hang upon the air about the place where the pine tree is, so that the place is holy and haunted. And lovers, wandering upon the beach at Takasaga, hear the great company of spirits singing together. Once upon a time, an old man and a young man left their village together in order to make a journey into a distant province. Now, whether they went for pleasure or for profit, for matters of money, of love or war, or because of some great or small vow that they had laid upon their souls, it is no longer known. All these things have very long since been forgotten. It is enough to say that it is likely they accomplished their desire, for they turned their faces homeward about the setting in of the winter season, which is an evil time for wayfarers, as everyone knows. Now, as they journeyed, it happened that they missed their way, and being in a lonely part of the country, they wandered all day and came upon no good soul to guide them. Near nightfall, they found themselves upon the brink of a broad and swift-flowing river. There was no bridge, no ford, no ferry. Down came the night with pitch-black clouds and a little shrewd wind that blew the dry and scanty reeds. And then presently, the snow came. The flakes fell upon the dark water of the river. The young man remarked how white the snowflakes were, but the old man shivered. In truth, it was bitter cold, and they were in a bad circumstance. Tired out, the old man sat down upon the ground. He drew his cloak around him and clasped his hands about his knees. The young man blew upon his fingers to warm them. Then he went up the bank a little, and at last he found a small, poor hut, deserted by some maker of charcoal or a ferryman. The young man said that, though the hut was in poor condition, he was thankful for the shelter on such a horrible night. So he carried his companion to the hut. They had no food and no fire, but there was a bundle of dried leaves in the corner. And here they lay down and covered themselves with their straw raincoats, and in spite of the cold, they soon fell asleep. About the hour of the ox, or the witching hour to us Westerners, the young man was awakened by an icy air upon his cheek. The door of the hut stood wide open, and he could see the whirling snowstorm outside. The young man cursed the storm for blowing the door open and that the snow had drifted in, covering his feet. So he raised himself up on his elbow, and then he saw that there was a woman in the hut. She knelt by the side of the old man, his companion, bent low over him till their faces almost met. White was her face, and beautiful. White were her trailing garments. Her hair was white with the snow that had fallen upon it. Her hands were stretched forth over the man that slept, and bright icicles hung from her fingertips. Her breath was quite plainly to be seen as it came from her parted lips. It was like a fair white smoke. Presently, she made an end of leaning over the old man, and rose up very tall and slender, and snow fell from her in a shower as she moved. "Oh, that was easy," she murmured, and came to the young man, and, sinking down beside him, took his hand in hers. If the young man was cold before, he was much colder now. He grew numb from head to heel. It seemed to him as if his very blood were frozen. His heart was a lump of ice that stood still in his bosom. A deathly sleep came over him. "This is my death," he thought. Can this be all? Thank the gods there is no pain." But the cold lady spoke. "It is only a boy, a pretty boy. I cannot kill him." "Listen," she said, stroking his hair. The young man could do nothing but moan. "You must never speak of me, nor of this night, not to your family, nor to a betrothed maid, nor to wedded wife, nor to your children, nor to the sun or moon, nor to the elements of the earth. Now swear it." He swore to this demand, and fell into a deep, deep sleep. When he awoke, it was high noon, and the warm sun was in brilliant shine. A kind countryman had found him and held him in his arms and made him drink from a steaming cup. "There now, you should recover. By the mercy of the gods, I came in time. Though what brought me to this hut, a good 3 ri, just a little over 7 miles to us Westerners, the august gods alone know. So you may thank them and your wondrous youth. As for the good old man, your companion, it is a different matter. He is past help. Already his feet have come to the parting of the 3 ways," said the countryman. The young man cried over and blamed the storm for the death of his friend. But he said no more, nor did he when a day's journey brought him home to his village, for he remembered his oath, and the cold lady's words were still in his ear. It is said that some years after this, in the leafy summertime, it chanced that the young man took his walks abroad alone, and as he was returning homewards about sundown, he was aware of a girl walking in the path a little way before him. It seemed as though she had come some distance, for her robes were pulled up. She wore sandals tied to her feet, and she carried a bundle. Moreover, she appeared sunken and walked unsteady and weary. It was not strange that the young man should presently come up with her, nor that he should pass the time of day. He saw at once that the girl was very young, fair, and slender. The young man asked where the maiden was going and what was her name. The young maiden bowed and answered, "Watashi wa Oyuki desu." "I am Oyuki." She stated that she was bound for Edo, to meet her sister and look for work. "Oyuki, you look very pale," said the young man. "Oyuki, murmured that she was faint with the heat of summer and wearied from her travel. But as she stood in the path, her slender body swayed, and she fainted, sliding down to the young man's feet. The young man lifted her gently and carried her in his arms to his mother's house. Her head lay upon his breast, and as he looked upon her face, he shivered slightly and was awed at how cold she felt, despite the heat of summer. When Oyuki was recovered, she thanked the young man and his mother sweetly for their kindness, and as she had little strength to continue her journey, she passed the night in their house. In truth, she passed many nights there, and the streets of Edo would never know her, for the young man grew to love her and made her his wife. Daily she became more beautiful. Fair she was, and white. Her little hands, though she worked in the house and in the fields, were as white as jasmine flowers. The hot sun could not burn her neck or her pale and delicate cheeks. In the fullness of time, she bore 7 children, all as fair as she, and they grew up tall and strong with straight noble limbs. Their equal could not be found upon the countryside. Their mother loved them, reared them, labored for them. In spite of passing years, in spite of the joys and pains of motherhood, she looked like a slender maiden. There came no line upon her forehead, no dimness to her eyes, and no gray hairs. While the women of the surrounding area marveled at these things and talked of them till they were tired. But Oyuki's husband was the happiest man for miles around, and with his fair wife and his fair children. Well, morning and evening he'd pray and say, "Let not the gods visit it upon me if I have too much joy." It is said that on a certain evening in winter, Oyuki, having put her children to bed and warmly covering them, was with her husband in the next room. The charcoal glowed in the hibachi. All the doors of the house were tightly shut, for it was bitter cold, and outside the first big flakes of a snowstorm had begun to fall. Oyuki stitched diligently at her little bright-colored garments. A paper lantern stood on the floor beside her, and its light fell full upon her face. Her husband looked at her reflectively and said, "Oh, my dear wife, when I look at you tonight, I am reminded of an adventure that came to me many years ago." Oyuki spoke not at all, but stitched diligently. It was an adventure or a dream, and which it was, I cannot tell. Strange it was as a dream, yet I think I did not sleep, he said. Oyuki went on sewing without hesitation and in silence. Then I saw a woman who was as beautiful as you and as white. Indeed, she was very like you. Tell me about her, said Oyuki, not lifting her eyes from her work. I have never spoken of her to anybody, said the man. Yet then he spoke, to his undoing. He told of his journey and how he and his companion, being caught in a snowstorm, took shelter in a hut. He spoke of the white, cold lady and of how his friend had died in her cold embrace. Well, then she came to my side and leaned over me, but she said, "It is only a boy, a pretty boy. I cannot kill him." Oh, how cold she was. So very cold. Afterwards, she made me swear before she left me. She made me swear, "You must never speak of me, nor of this night, not to your family, nor to a betrothed maid, nor to a wedded wife, nor to your children, nor to the sun or moon, nor to the elements of the earth. Now swear it." All this you swore to me, my husband, even to me, and after all these years you have broken your oath. Unkind, unfaithful, and untrue you are. She folded her work together and laid it aside, and then she went to where the children were and bent her face over each in turn. The eldest murmured, "Cold. I am so cold." So she drew up the quilt over his shoulders. The youngest cried out, "Mother," and threw out his little arms. "I have grown cold, too cold to weep anymore," she said. With that, she came back to her husband. "Farewell. Even now I cannot kill you. For my little children's sake, guard them well," she said. The man lifted up his eyes and saw her. White was her face, and beautiful. White were her trailing garments. Her hair was white as if the snow had fallen upon it. Her breath was quite plainly to be seen as it came from her parted lips. It was like a fair white smoke. "Farewell, farewell," she cried, and her voice grew thin and chill, like a piercing winter wind. Her form grew vague as a snow wreath or as a white vaporous cloud, and for an instant it hung up in the air. Then it rose slowly through the smoke hole in the ceiling and was never seen again. If you like these kinds of stories, subscribe, like, and share, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for future stories. And as always, I thank you for taking the time to listen. Arigatou gozaimashita. Mata na. The end.